A very good morning to everyone joining us in India, and for those who are logging in from the US, a very good evening to you. We have with us, as a part of a fireside chat, or I have a dream for India. Someone who is very, very accomplished in more ways than one. Karan Bajaj was not only the founder of Whitehat Junior, which was probably one of the fastest exits for a company in India, but he's also an author, novelist, thinker, striving yogi. Just too many, kind of attributes to you, Karan. So looking forward to a very interesting conversation today. So India at 75 has actually been an initiative that CII launched way back in 2007 when India was celebrating India at 60. And I think over the last decade and a half, we've seen how India has made progress, achieved significant change in many aspects of what our country represents. And while we will talk about all what we have been able to achieve in these last 15 years, particularly, or maybe over 75 years as well, I think I'd like to see how our focus today is around where we can be as India marches towards India at 100. This year is being celebrated as the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and we really want to use this to not only recognize what we have done, but also see what we can do to quickly accelerate. And I think some of the things, Karan, that you have embarked and launched are really the things that can drive our country forward in more ways than one. I mean, education, universal literacy, building capability and skills in the power of a large young population like India are definitely drivers for what will enable us to achieve a position of global leadership in any case. But the fact that it's being technologically led, and amongst many of the new age businesses, we often talk that while we might have been followers as a country in many of the other areas, at least in edutech, I think we are global leaders, and you played a large role in shaping that narrative. And so really let's start with really that that same question, right? We are in India, we are here in our 75th year, we are recognized globally as the technology leaders, whether it's both in terms of leadership as from management, but more importantly as engineers, talent. How do you really see India leveraging this entire technology burst, right, particularly in education, and make this paradigm shift over the next 25 years? Of course, there will be a lot of stepping stones as we get there, but just your opening thoughts around just this use of technology, because one of the things we always said in India at 75, that India's economic strength, moral leadership will be derived from our technological vitality. And you really represent one of those things which have been in a very important sector for India. So maybe we'll start with that and then make this a free-flowing conversation and capture your dreams for India as you go forward.
Yeah, no, a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I think great admiration for the organization as well as your bold vision and what you've accomplished so far. So I'm really grateful to be here. To really kick off this conversation, right? I think you've put the first question as it's exactly the right question, which is what role will technology play in education? And as a result of that, what role will education, because of the advantage of technology, play in the future of the country? I think the number one advantage that technology has given us as education entrepreneurs is personalization. So if there was a format of education that we knew before technology, that's the format of education we all grew up in. It was all about mass learning. So there would be one curriculum delivered by one teacher in a school setting, in a particular classroom setting of 30 to 40 kids, or maybe 50, 60 kids, depending on the school you are in. And everybody would get the same curriculum delivered to them. And they would pretty much have the same outputs because the input was the same. I think the power of technology, and different people have taken different formats to leverage it. For example, BYJU does the asynchronous learning very well, which means that they've created content and then they have built in a lot of personalization around gamification, etc., that allows every kid to consume the content based on where they are in their own learning journey. And when we look at the Whitehat Junior kind of model, it's built on the live classroom where one teacher is connected to one student. All of these are different models that are attacking the same problem of how do you make education extremely personalized to a particular kid's potential. And if you can think of a future where this kind of education becomes accessible to every kid, then you're really creating a generation which is learning based on their own unique potential, their customized needs, and they're flourishing because they have they've been met there versus being left like either under challenged or over challenged by an education system that was meant for mass learning and which kind of regresses to the average all the time, right? So I think that's the power of what technology can bring, and as a result can change the nation because it allows the personalization of education.
No, I think that's a very, very powerful thought. And you just take that one single, attribute, right, of personalization, empowering the individual, in a country like India, I think we can really truly unleash and unlock, the potential.
Absolutely.
But was this the thought process, Karan, when you started Whitehat Junior? Because Whitehat Junior, you also code people, you also enable people to become, the source of further technology growth, right? So, what were the thoughts and what got you to start Whitehat Junior when you actually got started? Tell us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. The origination point, I think, very similar to some of the work that you've been doing. The original idea of Whitehat Junior was that kids should be builders and creators. That should be their destiny, because there's some very fascinating research on how kids actually peak in creativity at age 5. And then subsequently, every decade after, their creative potential keeps going down in half. So if you take a sample set of kids, they actually test among the general population, they'll test in the top 95th percentile of creativity, and at age 5. By the time the same kids hit age 35, there's a very good longitudinal research done by a NASA professor. They actually test in the bottom 2% of creativity. So what happens is that as more and more rules and systems enter kids' lives through schools and mass learning, they start to lose the kind of the creative potential that that they inherently possess. So the idea of Whitehat Junior was that kids would build and create, and that would be their destiny forever. And coding was the best way for me to actually deliver that as the first step. So the first step was coding, and kids would code, and in coding, they would build games and apps. And they would get this feeling that, look, if I can code an app, I can create anything in this world, right? And that I think would, that the idea was that that would be their destiny forever then, that they define themselves as builders and creators. And some of them would pursue entrepreneurship or pursue technology fields, and some of them would pursue artistic fields. But that inner confidence that I'm a builder would be the kind of the core thesis of Whitehat Junior. And I always had the vision that it would go from coding to music to arts. And if all of education technology at that point of time was focused on the left brain, kind of preparing for IIT, JEE, etc., I wanted to kind of like do the creative side, that you'd and that's what the core idea of Whitehat Junior was. And part of that was that we chose curriculum like coding, music, arts, which was on the right brain side. And then also the one-on-one teacher was very important, which was the other core thesis of Whitehat Junior, because the presence of a one-on-one teacher allows you to kind of she or the teacher really enables you to leverage your creative potential in the best way possible, because of the feedback loop and the reward and the recognition that comes with doing a creative project that you can't get on doing it on your own. So I think that combination, that was the core vision behind it. And I think, again, like very similar to your kind of thesis, I thought of an India where more and more creators would be born, and that would be a very powerful India.
You raise a very interesting point, because one of the things, we are also through our group company Jet Synthesis, right, creating games and doing a lot around the product app innovation space. And what we really find is that the capabilities that we create in India are around creative engineering talent. That product design, right, or the final creating the great product out of India, right, is still a dream that we believe can get unlocked at scale over the next decade and a half, right? Did you ever think about that piece of the to complete this entire success oriented, career oriented, product life cycle kind of things when you've been looking at education, especially starting out early?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that, as I said, the core thesis was always that when kids build and create, we are entering a real paradigm shift in the world, where any job or any profile which requires routine tasks is going to be automated, right? Technology is moving so fast that everything that requires routine ordered tasks is going to get automated, and the currency of the world will become, what are you building and creating? In our generation, you could get away by doing mechanized tasks well, but in the next generation, once they come out of college or 12th grade, their currency will be what they are building and creating, because everything that's routine and ordered will be mechanized and automated very well by then. So I felt that that would be the imperative of the generation. And yet our school pedagogy, etc., is completely unchanged versus the time we were growing up. So when we were growing up, we had the same pedagogy that the generation is facing now, yet the imperative of the generation has changed. While our generation would have done very well with doing well in routine tasks, here the whole currency will be, what can you create and build? So that's why, as you rightly said, the US, etc., where they are actually creating cutting edge products, that's also a product of their education system, which allowed abstract thinking, where social sciences, etc., were as important a part as mathematics and science, while we were obviously very, very ordered around the left brain kind of development. And I think that's why I felt like the new generation would need the right brain development to be equal. And the future of the world will be people who stand at the center of the right and the left brain. That's why I chose coding as the first subject, because again, it's right at the center of the left and the right brain. You use logic, and then you use logic to kind of, create and build things. Similarly, music, which we did next. And like, it was all built around the same thesis that the people standing at the center of the left and the right brain will be the kind of the drivers of the world going forward.
I think if that's a very, very, very interesting way to look at, where the future of work, and because we keep debating, like what you rightly said, with AI and so much technology, what is the future of work going to look like, both from timing, but also kind of thing. So I think that's a great point. But again, to become a successful job creator, right, we need successful entrepreneurs, and we all know what that takes, right? It takes a lot. So as the creators start looking at the entrepreneurship opportunities, and in India today, when you're talking to young people, earlier parents used to encourage their kids to go get a secure job. That generational shift has also happened, with so much technology, internet, and new ideas, solving problems. You've been an outstanding entrepreneur, but I'm sure you've had so many, challenges, failures. What's your message to budding entrepreneurs who really want to, Karan, build businesses at scale, right? I think, from a country like India, we are able to come to some level, we can build, but we really want to unlock our true potential, right? And lead the world, right? Even today, in the top 100 companies in the world, we might have 2 companies from India, right? Given that we are such a large economy, we are the future, we need to have 20 or 30 of the companies, by India at 100, actually being from India in the top 100 companies of the world. So what will, that take, right? So the entrepreneurship journey to succeed and then to scale.
Yeah, no, very, very good question. I think there are 2, I would say my message or advice would be in 2 parts. One is for a person who's not yet become an entrepreneur, but who has dreams of entrepreneurship. I think if I look at my own journey, the surprising thing is that the dots connected in very, I would say, unusual ways. So I would say my first endeavor was that I had left my job to write a novel. And then subsequently, I wrote multiple novels, right? I think the moment you create your first thing. So in 2008, when I wrote my first novel, right, I was in a pretty much a regular job with Procter & Gamble in the US. The act of creating something for the first time really opens up a completely new chapter in your life, because everything that in your life, you are converging into, for example, writing your first novel. And then you feel that, look, your creative well is dry, and you look at more creative experiences. And so after that, I started to travel more and took more years off from my job to learn yoga, etc., because I was always looking to fill my creative well. Then I would write again. empty my creative well, keep filling my creative well again and again with more and more diverse experiences in life. All of that really came to fore in Whitehat Junior. For example, the idea that kids should be builders and creators, very linked to my writing life. The fact that I launched in the US very early. In 2019, when I was doing Whitehat Junior, the paradigm was that you would perfect your product in India over many years. Then you would have the confidence that you can attack international markets. But since I'd spent my, I would say, formative years backpacking and traveling, I was very confident that people all over the world are more similar than dissimilar. And I launched Whitehat Junior in the US almost only 1 year into the company. And the product did phenomenally well in the US. And that was obviously probably one of the things that led to the acquisition as well, because it was one of the first models that had cracked international shores. So I think the idea that you should build and create something very early of your own, and that could be a book, a YouTube channel, a blog, even if it's not something as significant as starting your own company, that opens up a chapter in your life in which you'll just fill your life with new and new experiences, and that eventually will lead you to form your own company in a very robust way, because you've entered the creation stream, if you will. For entrepreneurs out of India who are already kind of on the entrepreneurship journey, I think we should remember that I had the benefit of again living outside the country, backpacking a lot and traveling a lot as a part of my creative journey. But for those who haven't, I would say people all over the world are more similar than dissimilar. So I think Indian products should have a global thesis right from the start. Today, if the Whitehat Junior model, for example, under BYJU is operating in India, US, Brazil, Mexico, Australia, UK, and it's doing equally well in all these markets. I think, if I'm not wrong, when I last looked at the data, 30% of our revenue came from India and 70% came from outside India. So the fact that Indian products can go global, that's just the confidence that every entrepreneur should have, that people are more similar than dissimilar. You don't need to go through the journey that we always believe, that you should perfect the product in India over many years and then go outside India, because truly speaking, technology moves so fast that you don't have that luxury of waiting 7-8 years. Somebody else will do the same idea somewhere else and beat you to market, right? So I think Indian entrepreneurs should have the confidence that their product can go outside India, and that's how whoever captures the value stream of innovation, whichever country captures the value stream of innovation, will win in the long term, right? So whoever innovates first will win in the long term. So I think more and more models should be more international in nature rather than just Indian in nature.
You raised a very different point, as you were talking about your entrepreneurship journey, of filling your creative well and then emptying it, right? I mean, of course, I'm sure this stems from, you're a striving yogi. It comes from some core Indianness, that we can also give to the world as we move towards India at 100, how to build your own capability in a manner that, because the world in the West is taking all of that learning, which was, over centuries, available in India, so you are one of the few entrepreneurs probably who has tapped into that early, and seeing how that can get unlocked, right? And sometimes we find a lot of, Western entrepreneurs, Western, people in general, right? Or global people using Indian knowledge and doing so well and succeeding. Whereas a lot of us in India, we kind of tend to ignore it because there's just too much spirituality around us. There are temples every nook and corner. Maybe we get a little, immune to that, or we don't take that as well. So was this always a part of your life journey? It evolved in some shape, and how much importance do you give to that, right? I mean, you talk of a career which you also empty the creative, which I found pretty interesting. Because sometimes to add new things you got to empty it, but most people will go on aggregating and adding on. So some of your thoughts around these subjects, right? That will be
So I think two parts. I think the question on emptying the creative well, I think that's what I was saying, that once you start doing a creative project, right? So for me, the first novel, I emptied everything. That always happens when you do a creative project. Even if you do a startup, you take all of your life's learning and you put it into the project. And the moment that project is over, you realize that, you're pretty much dry. And if you do another creative project, you're going to use you're going to keep repeating what you've already done. So you kind of fill your life. You're almost compelled to fill your life with more experiences, more adventures to create something new again. So I think that's the power of always doing something, to build something that you will always keep having the urge to replenish the creative well and live a very, like I would say, experience-filled life. So I think that's one part that's why I highly encourage everybody to do something in which they are creating something, right? It could be a blog, a YouTube channel, a book, anything that allows you to put all of your life's work into one direction. The second part, though, I think is very interesting. From my job, I'd taken 1 full year off to do yoga and meditation, which was a very unusual move at that time. I was in my early 30s or probably mid 30s, and like everybody was saying, get married, have kids and all, but I'd taken off from my job and spent a year in an ashram in India. I'd lived in the Sivananda ashram and then gone up to the Himalayas to learn meditation. Very formative for me. The reason for why I did that was actually in some ways more personal, because my mom had passed away from cancer very early. I'd always been pulled to Eastern spirituality, but I think my kind of meaning of life question. So I was very into nirvana, moksha. How does this whole ecosystem work? And like, I really wanted to experience it firsthand. So that's the reason I did it. I didn't achieve any of that, what I set out to achieve, but I think the one of the best things that happened in my life for that year in which I learned yoga and meditation, because a couple of things happened, right? First is just the act of living in an ashram in India alone, or in very bare circumstances, right? There are 50, 60 people living in a dorm room, like you're just practicing yoga asanas every day. I think what I learned from that phase was a lot of like this idea of willful poverty, which Stoicism has, the idea that, look, you need very little to survive, right? Like I spent a year there in an ashram with nothing, and I was very fulfilled, right? So I think that really liberated me afterwards to take very big risks in my life, because I always felt, look, I have nothing to lose. If I lose everything, I'm still fine, right? That's what I learned in living in an ashram for a year. And then obviously, like the act of doing yoga and meditation really kind of simplifies your life. Really, I like my diet, my energy levels. So I started Whitehat when I was 40 years old, and everybody in the tech world at that time was 25, 26, all the developers, coders, etc., that I would hire, and nobody could keep up with my energy, which is actually a very under talked about point, right? When you're like starting a company, the founder's energy drives the energy of the organization. I think the gift of yoga and meditation for me was so much energy that people always found it hard to cope up with me no matter their age. And I think that really drove the speed of the organization, which I think is was another kind of hidden benefit of that period. Yeah. So I again highly recommend doing this, inculcating this like Indian spiritual discipline as a part of your life.
No, it's interesting you say this, because I had a similar experience. Even my mom passed away of cancer, drew me more to things like yoga, meditation, and what you rightly said, the energy levels really changed significantly. But I think the one place where what you've done differently, right, particularly is when you're looking at your career in phases, right? You write a book, create a company, go back to writing a book, take a year off. That approach. So historically, if we ever looked in India, right, we said, you have a career for a lifetime. People used to get into one job, government job, and hope to, to see and derive their livelihood there. Today we talk of a lifetime of careers, right? I mean, maybe that's a switch. But even then, people look like, okay, how do I move, enhance my livelihood, earning capability, move up the value chain, and things like that, right? But what you're suggesting is really taking breaks, looking at different things. Do you believe that that's the best way to really build better capacity? I mean, even as a country, right? Is that so? There's a new education policy, as you know. So education will go in one way, but education can only take you that far, and then it comes to choices that you make, right? Whether it is where you specialize, how do you do things? Like the realization that you said you need very little, enables people to take more risk. But most parents, and when they're looking at young kids, will tell them, don't take too much risk. How does all of that shape up? And do you recommend that? Or is it only suited for some type of people? Would love to understand.
No, I think if I look at my last 20 years, I've concluded 2 or 3 things very, very strongly, which I think I hold very firmly, because I've had a bit of a lot of data points now, right? If it was just one move that, look, I did a startup, it worked out, then that would be too restricted a data point. But if I look at multiple data points of like novels that have been successful, some that have not been successful, like startups have been successful, like the Discovery stint where I was the CEO of Discovery and did a lot of things there. If I look at all of the data points, I've seen two or three things emerge. One is that personal growth always leads to professional growth. So it might link to that point though, is that systems are very inefficient in the short term, but extremely efficient in the long term. So when you take a move of personal growth, for example, when I first left my job in 2008 to backpack for 6 months, I backpacked in South America, Eastern Europe, Brazil, Peru, etc., across the Amazon, etc. It was a move of personal growth. And in the short term, when I came back from the sabbatical, if you will, I came back at the time when Lehman Brothers had collapsed in the US. There were no jobs. I had a pretty tough time re-entering the job market. Similarly, when I did yoga and meditation, etc., there was like some, struggle with re-entering the market. But what I saw over a long period of time was that when I made these moves of incredible personal growth, whether that was taking my first sabbatical to travel, then taking another sabbatical to learn yoga and meditation, then taking another sabbatical to become a full-time writer, I saw that eventually that led to a lot of professional growth because I grew so much in that period that that 1 year of learning yoga and meditation, for example, was worth 5-6 years of doing the same thing in my job. And when I came back to my job, I was more centered, better. And even if I took one step back, I would leap forward 4 or 5 steps. And like, for example, Discovery, when they were looking for a CEO in India, I became the CEO very young in India because I had a mix of like the creative with my novels and my business career, and they were looking for somebody who had that left-right balance, right? So professional growth always follows personal growth. So when you take extraordinary personal growth moves, they'll always lead to professional growth. But linked to that point is that it doesn't happen in the short term, right? Life is a bit unforgiving in the short term, but very forgiving in the long term. So if you take a longer term view, I think those will always help. And that's why, as they say, right, like doing are you really working 7 years, or are you doing the same thing that you're doing over 1 year for seven times in a row? And if you're like actually taking these moves where you're like doing like new things which are really pushing your growth envelope, then you'll always win in the long term. And that's my firm conclusion after like a lot of data points over the long period. So now I always make decisions of growth, never make decisions of fear for that reason.
Powerful words. And right now you're in Costa Rica and you're kind of encouraging your next gen to also kind of grow differently. Tell us a little bit about where you are and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, right now it's nighttime, like midnight in Costa Rica. So I, after like the Whitehat Junior exit and kind of transitioning with BYJU's over a year, I had an endpoint. So I decided to take this year in Costa Rica to again grow in different dimensions. I wanted to take mountaineering very seriously. I've been hiking, so now I wanted to do mountaineering much more seriously than I had done my yoga teachers training. I wanted to do my advanced yoga teachers training. I'd not written nonfiction before, so I wanted to pursue these interests for a year before I like came back into the world again, if you will. So I kind of decided to step out and go to Costa Rica, and and my kids are also in a school in the mountains in like a remote place in Costa Rica, because I wanted them to experience a kind of education and wanted to see that myself very closely also. Like a much more like a creative education in the public school, bilingual education. So that's what I'm doing right now for this year before I re-enter in some form of public service back in India.
No, I'm pursuing this model of taking a break, going out, coming back, because it's very unique, right? And especially when you have success attached to it. But does it also compromise? I mean, did you exit Whitehat Junior because you were now looking for your next thing, or would you have scaled Whitehat Junior beyond the point? So was that decision interestingly also taken because you were looking at something like that?
You see, you should know yourself very well, right? So I think even the Whitehat Junior exit, like it's always a hard decision. I usually believe that people overthink decisions, while what I've seen is that most decisions in life are two-way doors. So 90% of decisions that I've made are two-way doors, right? Where if the decision doesn't work out, you can always go back. So for example, I made a decision in 2015 of becoming a full-time writer in New York. It didn't work out, but it was a two-way decision in the sense that I could turn back, right? And I re-entered the corporate world and became the head of Discovery in India. So most decisions are two-way doors. When you exit a startup, though, that's a one-way door, because once you sell your company, there is no going back. So those decisions you really ruminate over. And when I was selling Whitehat Junior, it was a very thoughtful decision for me. And overall, I think it's very important for an entrepreneur to know themselves well. I think when you exit a startup, you have to think of two things, right? One, in a startup, it's very hard to be in a position where the acquirer, the acquired, and the investors all are happy. Typically, you'll find one of these parties very unhappy. In our case, Whitehat Junior, in very quick timing, had grown to a revenue of $100 million plus. So when BYJU acquired it for $300 million, it was a good deal for BYJU because it was at a very low multiple compared to what Indian companies are acquired at. I had diluted very little in the company because I'd grown with very little capital through very strong discipline. So again, it was a win for the stakeholders of the company, and the investors had gotten a 50x return on the investment in barely a year, which again was a very significant move. So when you've got that trifecta working, it's very unusual. Typically, what happens is that companies raise their valuation so much that it's very hard for them to exit at a value that the latest investors are happy with, or so they are not happy, or the acquirer is not happy because the valuations are extremely high. So I felt like, that was a perfect time in a way, because the trifecta was happy. And then I knew myself very well as a person, that I'm a person who likes to, live my life in phases, like go very deep into something and really go into the nuts and bolts of it. And then once I've learned everything I can, contributed everything I can, I like to, not repeat the same thing, but learn something new altogether. And I knew that there would be a phase of time when, I have a lot of conviction in everything I do, whether that was discovery or startup or writing, but I just go very deep into something and then go into something else altogether. So I knew myself well enough to know that, it was time for me to go into something new after I'd really gone very deep into it and worked very 24/7 for many years trying to get it right here.
Given that you know yourself very well, I mean, where do you see yourself India at 2047?
India at 27, I feel now I'm being very called to public service, because if I think of the first 20 years of my career, they were very focused on, I would say, personal growth, personal endeavors, really becoming the best version of myself. I think I feel a sense of stability now, and a feeling like a sense of personal stability and growth, and now want to contribute very actively to the public sector. And I'm kind of just figuring out what would be the best channel to do that right now. Yeah.
I think success to significance is another concept, that we see a lot of young people, once they've achieved something, it's an inflection point that comes in many people's lives.
Yes.
I'm sure in your case it's come multiple times in different shapes and forms. But
it's a very distinct one, because I think in the past, all the sabbaticals, everything was in an exercise in fully exercising my personal potential. Obviously, always with the sense of impact and how that would be a positive move for the world. Whether I was writing my novels or the startup, I was always thinking about how it could have a positive impact versus just becoming a financial exercise. But now I think I just want to kind of devote my life to more selfless service altogether. Yeah.
And I think the world will truly benefit, from that. And as you get into that phase of your life, what's your dream for India? Right. So, India at 100 will not just happen overnight, right? We'll see progress from India at 75 to India at 80, India at 85. We'll reevaluate, priorities change. You saw what happened with the pandemic. Even the vision, that has been carried forth, has gone through, tremendous, change, because, people just going back to rural. There was a lot of focus around, building skills, clusters, affordability of housing, and, sustainable energy to grow economic, livelihoods and manufacturing, to now really building rural India back, right? Given that many have moved back, we're not sure how things will shape up. So different, points, of course, external factors will change, the course of what becomes a priority for India. But what's your dream for it?
My dream for India is that if I were to personalize it a lot. When I was doing the startup, when I was doing Whitehat Junior, it really struck me that there are 20 million households out of 250 million households in India who make more than 10 lakhs an annum, right? And all of the Indian internet industry, the startup industry, is targeting these 20 million households. and the remaining 230 or 240 million households are the only way for them to like India is the strength of all of the startups and the strength of all of the investments coming into India is only as strong as those 250 million households. And if we don't create an ecosystem for them to rise at the same rate as the top 20 million households, we are like, it's like everything that we are talking about, like the growth of India, the promise of India is hollow. Right. And I think that really struck me, that like the only way to really solve the problem is exactly like the initiatives that you guys are like, initiatives like you guys are doing. And that's why I think our top talent being pulled towards lifting these 250 million or 230 million households versus figuring out how to best market or explore or extract value from the 20 million households is where I see where I would see the top talent of the country working on that area. I think this country is very talented. I think people are very talented. I think the kind of the talent we produce every year is incredible. And I think if they're all focused very singularly, and if the public policy system, which looks like the government and is doing so well at, is allowing the top talent to work towards these 230 million households, I think we'll be a very different India. But if we continue to focus, if our top talent continues to focus on how to extract the best value from the 20 million households, it'll be a very hollow India, So I think my personal energy would be now targeted towards like the 250 million households and the next 230 million households. And I hope more and more people make that choice and create a world which looks very different 25 years from now.
There's definitely a lot of synergy.
Yeah,
there's definitely a lot of synergy around the thought process for India at 75. One of the inspiration for India at 75 was C.K. Prada, who always talked of the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid.
Correct.
And he said the best way to make them consumers is make them producers first. Enable them to earn a livelihood, and then they'll come into the consumption economy. And I think the effort to be able to create that opportunity definitely exists in India. I think it's a very strong way to grow and scale, a lot of the initiatives, and efforts. But, as we work towards that, if I were to ask you, what should we do in the next, say, 6 months, right? So August 2022 is the Amrit Mahotsav, we're getting to 22. I'm just saying, right, your recommendation maybe to business, industry, policymakers, right? Where is India's priority today? What should it be, right? Maybe for the next 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. What I'm trying to say, I know you're a long-term guy, but also the short-term, where can operational efficiency, execution be improved and enhanced in the short term to obviously strengthen us for the long term?
It's a very good question. When I've done my own modeling around this, I think for me, it keeps going back to whoever innovates captures the value stream of the world. So for example, when Apple creates an iPhone, even though the iPhone is produced in China or the parts are produced in India, etc., the value stream is going to Silicon Valley, right? 50% of the profits or 70% of the profits go to Silicon Valley. Every time anybody takes an Uber all around the world, in a way, like Silicon Valley is like the Roman Empire. All over the world, Silicon Valley is taxing. Every movement is going back to Silicon Valley. Till the time the US has that advantage, obviously, has Silicon Valley, obviously they'll continue to capture the value stream of the whole world's income. So if I think of India, I would say figuring out clusters in manufacturing, for example, where we can create, we have the natural advantage of a large labor pool, figuring out clusters in manufacturing where we can create the most innovative manufacturing, especially now, given the fact that people would love to move from China to India, their manufacturing basis, for example, if I look at pockets of innovation where we can capture the value stream of the whole world, that would give the, I would say, the 10x boost, right? Versus the internal movement of the economy. Obviously, the internal movement of us selling goods to the, creating goods, selling it to our own population, but actually creating these truly innovative, truly world-class innovation hubs, and that's very easy to create. It's not hard, right? If we pick up two or three industries and create manufacturing hubs which are the best in the world, by kind of like doubling down, focusing on that, putting our best talent on it, we'll capture the whole value stream of the world's manufacturing innovation and get inflow to come to India. For example, I would say like stuff like that is very like in our hands to do. But I would say the general theme is, how do you become the value stream of the innovation? How do you create even if you can't create the iPhones and stuff, because the Silicon Valley advantage is very high and that is a long-term plan, you can create it at the kind of the farther end of the value chain, right? Which is what China has done, for example, with AI and robotics in certain industries, and we could do exactly that.
Because the innovation, when it happens more from an Indian context, right, the non-negotiables are different. It is scalability, it is price performance, affordability, within which you innovate. But when you innovate for the world, because you talked about going to the US first, I think it's a different. So many a times, even entrepreneurs in India are kind of caught between these two, challenges, right? So we say if you can solve an India problem, but there's only so much value that is created. You solve a global problem. And somewhere we'll have different types of people coming.
And both have their roles, but I think more and more entrepreneurs should have the confidence that the world is more similar than dissimilar and their solutions can be global. That was the confidence because of my own background I had early, which helped my own entrepreneurship thesis. And if I look at just one entrepreneurship journey, right? Whitehat Junior was acquired for $300 million. Bunch of that investment money, bunch of that acquisition came from outside the country. Investors outside the country bought me, and I paid incredible taxes to the government for that deal. And I think that's what we have to do, right? If we are that's how we are creating value within the country.
Absolutely. Different people will contribute differently. And, probably that's the last question. We've run 45 minutes. I don't know, we can continue for another hour. But, is on this space, right? When we talk of, participative governance, right? This change to India at 100 is not going to happen with just one set of stakeholders, kind of driving that change, right? Different people come in differently. One of the things we've done strongly with India at 75, CII has led, and even the government has, been very strongly supportive, the current government through the MyGov platform and others, is to see how citizens can participate, right? More. So, you give time, you give skills, you give money, maybe small ticket, right? How, just quick one thought around, how do you see participative governance? Any thoughts around, what should that model kind of look like for a country like India? Particularly if you want to see accelerated change, as we get to India at 100 for those 230 million households.
Yeah, I think tech can play a very big role in technology, and technology networks can play a very, very big role in participative governance. And I think it's a very underleveraged area. It's a very interesting area on how community can be involved in participation. And I think entrepreneurs taking a crack at that would be very interesting, because this is a country of opinions, and being able to harness that opinions into a structured format is a very easy but meaningful tech problem to solve.
Great. I think, and I think the pro bono participation of people from corporate India coming in, all of us doing it together. And I'm going to definitely take you on, as you're committing the next phase of your life to helping shape that, the 230 million, households is really what I think as an industry platform, as multiple stakeholders, we are trying to do, and would love to, engage with you, see how, we can really pick the right priorities, see great execution happen in some areas, enable that to happen at scale. So I think collaborating in different shapes and forms, is really the only way to make that happen in an accelerated manner. So it's just been lovely. It's been a joy, Karan, chatting with you. And as I said, we couldn't cover many of the other topics, the thinking behind books and many other stuff, but we leave that for another day. But thank you, for sharing your dream for India and where we can go from here on. Enjoy the rest of your time in Costa Rica.
Thank you very much. And I'll see you soon.
Re-energized to take on the next challenge.
Yeah, be back in India soon, and look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.